Welcome to another episode on the challenges and triumph of online teaching during COVID-19 at the Female Educators Roundtable with your host, Debby Enoe from Teacher Success Coach, and two of my guests, Kim and Kate. Welcome, guys. Thank you very, very much for coming onto the platform and accepting my offer. Right? I'm really, really excited to hear you guys take on working during COVID-19. Can you please introduce yourselves?
Sure. My name is Kim, and I am from Canada, and I teach high school English and theater, so grades 9 through 12.
Okay, what age group is that?
So that would be 14 to about 18.
Okay, teenagers. Thank you.
Yes, yeah.
My name is Kate. I am from the United States. I'm currently living in a rural town where I'm teaching really probably 16 through 18, but I also am an athletic director as well as run our after school homework center. So really my responsibilities range from our sixth graders, like 11-year-olds, all the way through the 18-year-olds.
Oh Lord! So you're having all the puberty, oh Lord!
Yes, I feel yeah. I'm currently teaching AP English and English, but kind of span a lot of different responsibilities and hats.
Yes, you would, because of the age group you're teaching as well from 11. Unlike Kim that's teaching the teenagers, you're teaching pre. Oh Lord. Okay. Thank you guys and welcome on board. Today we'll be looking at individuals' experiences, as I've been looking at on all the programs, how we actually have been going through the process of teaching online. Bearing in mind, as I keep on repeating in every session, we have not been trained to teach online. We had to train ourselves, because when we got trained as to be teachers, we were trained in terms of the physical classroom. Anything else, you had to teach yourself. And I must say, as educators, we've actually taught ourselves, and we didn't think, we swam across. And I must say, we've done damn good at it. I'm really not interested in what anyone else has to say, but as an educator myself, and I've been speaking to all these educators around the world, I know that we've actually swam because we had no option. We had a group of students in front of us, or we knew we had a group of students in front of us that we had to teach, and we had to find the best way we could actually impart this knowledge onto them. Bearing in mind, as I said, we actually had the physical classroom training, and that's what we do. We had to find ways of actually knowing and doing the online platform. And it would be really nice to hear from you guys how you actually, negotiated. And I could see that you didn't sink, you swam, because you're here now to tell us about it. Okay, Kim, would you like to tell us how you actually, tell us about your experiences, please?
Sure, yeah. So we had just started spring break when COVID really hit us here in Canada. And so we weren't told until maybe a few days before our spring break was supposed to be over what was going to happen next. So we didn't know if we were actually coming back to school at the end. We had anticipated that chances were we were going to be like not coming back for a couple of weeks, but we didn't know what that was going to look like. So it wasn't until a few days before spring break was set to end and we were really unsure of how we were moving forward that the government here announced that we weren't going back to school. And they didn't actually give us a date on when we were going back to school. They said, indefinitely, you're going to be kind of providing online learning. And so they gave us another week to plan our online learning, and then we had to jump right in. And so essentially we were given some tools in terms of like what we were allowed to use and not allowed to use. But at that point, most of the tools that we would need to use, and for me being a theater teacher, I need to be able to see my students and be able to be face to face. And we weren't allowed to use Zoom or Google Meets or anything because it was a Freedom of Information Privacy Act violation in the beginning, before Zoom or Google Meets had adjusted some of their privacy settings to make it safe for schools to use here. So we had to do everything via email, Google Classroom, all of that kind of stuff. And for some of our students who didn't have access, I live in the school that I teach at is lower socioeconomic status, location, and a high risk and at-risk demographic. So a number of our students don't have access to these resources. They don't have computers. They, bus from, God knows how long to be able to make it to school when they were able to attend. They don't have cell phones. They don't have access to the kind of technology that they would need to be able to access in order to successfully participate and engage in online schooling. And given that it's high school, there were all these added challenges in terms of our graduating students, how we were going to be able to support them. They had portfolios that they needed to put together as part of their grad plan that required face-to-face interviews and things like that, that they were now no longer able to complete at the same rate. And one of the things that I noticed happening very, very quickly, both from parents and from students, was just this overwhelming feeling of anxiety. And the expectation was that we as teachers were going to help them to manage that anxiety. And some of us, I'm a mental health professional as well. And so I do feel equipped to manage that in some way, but it shouldn't be part of the expectation. And it ended up being part of the expectation that all of these anxieties and fears that our students were having, that we didn't have answers for any of their questions. And now we're having to be everything to 90 students in a platform that we weren't necessarily able to communicate with them reliably. So it was a challenge. And then we were kind of in that weird limbo up until we were notified a week before June 1st that we were back to school 1 day a week. So it was all very much like fly by the seat of your pants kind of situation where we weren't given, and fair enough, we didn't have a lot of warning, but we weren't given a lot of warning before we had to quickly readjust yet again and provide a new modality through which students needed to then access their learning.
Okay, thank you. So which means you're saying to me that you guys had some time on the online platform, which wasn't very effective because, the student didn't have the tools. And then you were told that you need to transition into the classroom once a week.
Yes. So then we needed to provide both online learning for our students who weren't able to access the 1 day a week of support that we were able to provide in person. And then we needed to be physically at the school to provide in-person learning 1 day a week. So students may or may not have been able to attend that 1 day a week. It was essentially like our school in particular was like, we have incredible administration. So they were really supportive and really helpful. Not every school had the luxury of having admin who is really there for their teachers. So you did have some students who, weren't able to attend the in-person learning. And so teachers then had to ensure that they were still able to track down any of the requirements from their students that they'd still needed in order to complete the course. And so you're really doing two jobs. You're doing whatever you're doing in-person learning, and then you're also trying to manage the online learning for the students who aren't able to attend and engage in person.
Wow, that's a lot of work. Thank you. I'll come back to you just now because there's a few questions. Thanks, Kate. How was your experience? What's your experience have been?
Well, first in the United States right now, we are very much going through a reckoning with just our history and our handling of COVID. So it is tumultuous and contentious as it can be. And when COVID really hit the United States, we were slow to react, I think is the most polite way I can put it. And especially in the South where I live. I'm not from the South, so it was a little bit of an eye-opener for me is how I'm in South Carolina and how my state was going to handle this. And it was a lot of inaction. So I remember we got out, our school dismissed for online learning in the middle of March. And the only reason we knew the governor was going to announce on a Saturday that schools would close was because we knew someone in the governor's office. We're a small private school, and we have a lot of kids who are and lower socioeconomic status, but we have very wealthy kids too. So we knew we had insider information. So I remember on Friday, we stopped our academic classes after lunch, and every grade level had to be trained on how to kind of what the rules were going to be for our online learning platform. We were already using Google Classroom, but we had to come up very quickly with policies like attendance, expectations, rules of engagement, like just a plan for our student body. And I remember I was teaching a class when my administrator walked in and said, "Hey, I need to meet with you right after this class. We need to come up with a plan." So it was me and another teacher and our two administrators, our head of school and our associate head of school, in a classroom, like, okay, what are we going to do? Coming up with a plan during our, 35-minute lunch period to then present to our students. And we did, and it was okay. And then after school, we trained the faculty on how to use Google Meet. And then told them like, hey, we're going to open the school on Monday and you can come and get your things as needed. But on Tuesday, you are expected to take over online learning immediately. So it was really intense. Luckily, for me, I'm pretty technology savvy. So, it wasn't as much of a transition. All of my classrooms were nearly paperless. So that was okay as far as just the technology aspect, but not being able to see my students was a challenge. I spent more time on the phone talking to them one-on-one than I did really teaching content because, the first week they were like, yeah, cool, vacation, I don't have to come to school. But then by week 3, they really were sad and depressed and lonely. So I found myself really scaling back the workload and just checking in with them and trying to provide someone who would listen to them and understand like what's going on and try to help them keep perspective of like, I understand that this essay doesn't feel important to you right now, but there will be an end to this at some point and you need to pass this class. So we did a lot of like group Google Meets where we would, and they were just study sessions like, hey, let's talk about geometry today. Like, hey, let's talk about, how's Spanish going? And we would do those kind of after school hours and checking in with the kids. And it was incredibly time consuming for me and also for them. They were exhausted. And our school is so small that we all have to wear a lot of hats. So I was on the phone constantly. I reached out to the coaching staff because I'm a member of the athletic department, and they were on the phone with their players too and trying to make sure the kids are engaged. But it was really tough. I, like him was saying about anxiety was just through the roof, both for the teachers and the students. And I found myself reaching back out to my therapist, like, no, this isn't working. Like, I have an eye twitch and I can't sleep. Like, what is going on? And it really was because I was just so isolated, but also overwhelmed with trying to make sure that my students were receiving the absolute best education that they could. Especially our kids who, are feeling disenfranchised, right? So again, I said that our nation is going through a reckoning, and that's very true. The private schools in the South were set up when the schools were desegregated. So they were white flight schools. Well, our school is not that. Our school is a very diverse population. Our town is about 50% Black, 50% white. So our school is not quite there, but pretty close. So you have to meet the needs of the learners with this Black Lives Matter movement and what they're seeing. And, that really understanding that they are valued and important and their experiences are real. And then we have the layer of where we have international students from Asia who live in a house on our campus or near our campus, and they're concerned for their families. And am I going to be able to get home in the summer? Do I need to stay here? We have them from China and Korea and Vietnam. and then now we have kids that are trying to get back here from France. We have actually no, the French kids are already here. We have a child from Canada who's coming. We have Ireland, kids from China trying to get here, and just wondering, how am I going to start school? It's been a real roller coaster of emotions.
Thank you. There's so many question buzzing in my head. How did you guys deal with in terms of discipline, in terms of engagement, in terms of assessment, in terms of behavior? You know, how did...
My approach didn't change all that much, to be totally honest. I'm not a disciplinarian by nature. My whole shtick is build relationship and the rest will come. And so like my classroom management strategy is cooperative and community. And so like my entire focus is, if we don't have community, how can I expect you to want to be a part of it and to engage in it? And so fortunately for me, I'd had about a month and a half with my students beforehand for my junior class, my English, like my young English kids. And then my senior theater class, I had already had them. We had just finished our musical, and I was very well connected to this group of students. So in terms of engagement, it was more so the more that I could acknowledge what I knew they were experiencing. Like my theater students were always really engaged in person, but I knew it was going to be really difficult to get them to engage online, because that's not what they take. Nobody takes theater because they want to stare at a screen all day. They don't do it because they decide they want to do research in high school. You know, they're taking it because they want to perform. They're perhaps a little more extroverted and need that social connection, and they weren't getting that. So I revamped my lesson plans to make it so that I could incorporate a lot more escapism for them, so that they had opportunities to escape the reality that they were living, while also being able to include opportunities for them to talk about the reality that they were living. So once a week, rather than doing, you know, like I did office hours for my English class, where I would be available to answer questions through Zoom once we were allowed to use it again, of course. But for my theater class, I didn't do any online work that way because it just didn't work for them. So I would do like check-ins each week. And given that, like, I'm also a drama therapist, so I was able to actually use some of that to be able to like talk about emotion and talk about and normalize their feelings and experiences. And that really took care of the classroom management piece and the engagement piece, because it took the pressure off. As soon as they were able to say, I'm really overwhelmed right now and I don't know how to do this, I could respond with, well, let's talk about when your deadline is then, because originally it was Friday, and if Friday's not going to work for you, how can I get you to engage, or how can I adapt or modify this assignment so it feels more manageable for you right now? And so it gave a lot more opportunity for there to be conversation about the work, which I think was really important to be able to keep that engagement consistent, because for students who were really overwhelmed, it didn't work to then start harassing them about the work that they weren't able to do. And the more that I would try to follow up with them, if they weren't engaging, if they weren't coming to any of the online meetings that I had, or if they weren't participating online or submitting work through Google Classroom, it didn't make it so that they wanted to do the work more if I started emailing them relentlessly saying, this is due and you're going to fail. So it ended up being more of a conversation, which for some students, it helped me to build a lot more relationship with them than I'd even had before. And for other students, when they still weren't able to engage, then you're involving the family, and depending on how the family, you know, responds, or depending on how connected or engaged the family is, like I said, you know, we're in a higher risk area. And so not every student has a family that can support their learning. And so then you run the risk, you know, of calling a parent and making that situation more difficult for the child. And so it's this tightrope, you know, that you're walking constantly. And so the most important thing for me was having that relationship, so that I knew if I could call home, if it was safe for me to call home and talk to their parent, or if I needed to have a little more grace for this student. And then really it wasn't so much about modifying my expectations of the quality of work. It was my monitoring of my own expectations around the amount of work. So like Kate had said, you know, realizing that you might just have to decrease the amount of work that you're providing to students so that you're still seeing that they can demonstrate the core outcomes for the course, but maybe they don't have to do it over the course of 3 assignments. Maybe you have one assignment that demonstrates 2 or 3 of those core outcomes so that they're still meeting the curricular needs, but it's not as intensive or rigorous as it may have been if you were able to do it face-to-face and they were able to have that support in person.
Yeah, thank you. I could see that. Yes, Kate, in terms of forming the community on the online platform, how did you form a community, and in terms of engagement and in terms of assessment, how did you do that?
You know, I'm lucky because our school is very much a family. You know, we're a pretty small school. I think this year we're going to end up with around 330 kids. So it's a small school, and a lot of our kids have been together a long time. So the community is really there. It was just maintaining it, which was tough. But we did things like we had weekly just check-ins where we would just kind of all get on a Google Meet, be like, hey, what are you doing? You know, how are you doing? Are you playing 3 hours of video games? Like maybe we could play 1.5 hours of video games. Like, did you eat today? Like questions like that. And really, you know, thinking about the hierarchy of needs, you know, I'm not sure that I completely buy into the triangle theory that it's, you know, that it's a triangle, that we can't meet needs until the previous ones have been met. It's kind of more like a messy collage of needs, but making sure they're all getting met. You know, did you eat today? You know, did you wash your clothes today? Have you gotten out of bed? You were wearing that shirt when I saw you yesterday on the Google Meet. Like, how many days have you been wearing that shirt? You know, those kinds of questions. Just making sure, you know, that the kids are taking care of themselves. And a lot of them are also responsible for younger siblings. Like, how's your brother doing? You know, how's his schoolwork going? You know, questions like that. Just to let the kids know that, like, I understand that you have a lot, and I don't expect, you know, this essay for my class to be your top priority. I think goes a long way. Really, as far as like ground rules and discipline, I have two classroom rules, and one is respect each other and yourself, and embrace the struggle. Like, if you're not struggling, you're probably not trying hard enough, and be respectful. So it really didn't change. You know, I expect you to try as hard as you can and be respectful of yourself and others. And the kids, you know, they're wonderful. And if I'm respecting them, they're respectful of me. So that really didn't much change at all, which was great. You know, my kids were wonderful. And I'm very lucky, again, to have such wonderful kids, but it was very clear that they were overwhelmed. There's no doubt about it. You know, I have a number of kids who are at risk. When they come to us from different schools, they're just not on level. And, you know, we have several, the big challenge this year was we had kids who are trying to play college athletics, but you have to qualify for your standardized test and your GPA. You have to. That's a hard line. So making sure that they did not fall short of that. So luckily we had them all do the SAT and the ACT before, so we had that, but they had to finish, or else that was their future. So our administration was great and made sure that every child had a device so that they could access what they needed for online learning. Our school stayed open to kids that needed the internet, that could come and, you know, either sit in the parking lot, or if they couldn't get to school, we would arrange that for them, to give them access to what they needed. There was no way that we were going to allow them to fall through the cracks as far as needs. Actually, one of our coaches, I remember I kept calling him and saying, hey, this child, you know, he's not engaged. He plays basketball for you. He answers the phone every time I call, and we talk for a little bit, but there's something just not right. I'm concerned. I'm concerned. And he said, okay, I got it. And I was like, okay, I don't know what that means, but I'm glad that you got it. And so he called me and he said, yeah, so I went over to his house and I knocked on his door. And I was like, it's a pandemic. what are you doing? But that's the only way, you know, somebody needed to see the child. And after his coach showed up, the child was so much more engaged, and it really just took, I had to go, you know, the coach had to go knock on his door. And, you know, sometimes you have to do it. And unfortunately, you know, teachers are held to this level of expectation that we're supposed to go above and beyond. And you know what? We continue to do so because we love our students. But that shouldn't mean that we have to risk our physical safety. It happens over and over again, especially in the United States. If you look at the amount of school shootings that happen here, plus the pandemic, there's this question now of how am I supposed to do an active shooter drill when we're being socially distant? Those things should never be said in the same sentence. It should never happen, right? I shouldn't have to worry about an active shooter and teaching in a pandemic. It's ridiculous. So, you know, we have to do a better job to protect our educators and our kids, and not rely on our teachers to be really the front line of defense, both with a pandemic and, you know, our issue in the United States of gun violence. It's just over and over again, our teachers are underpaid, undervalued, and really, unfortunately, because we love our children, we will continue to do it. Which, you know, I think society sometimes counts on us that way.
Why do you think that educators are undervalued and underpaid? I'm turning it out to both of you.
Well, I know in where I live right now, I don't have a teachers union. So we all negotiate individually, which is part of the issue. Collective bargaining helps protect teachers. But I think really, you know, it just goes back to, as Kim said earlier before we were on this call, of being women. We're just, society isn't going to value our work in the same way. Also, we went from being heroes in March to, you know, before March, we were just babysitters. And then everyone had to watch their own kids. And they were like, wow, this is kind of hard. And I really object to the term homeschooling that got thrown around. Like, I'm homeschooling my kid. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're watching them do the curriculum that the teachers have designed.
Yes. Yes.
So we went from that to now it's, well, teachers are selfish. It's like, no, what? How did this happen?
Yeah.
But it's just, you know, because society is ready to talk about the needs of the children, but never the needs of the teacher.
It's interesting. Just now I'm going to ask definition of homeschooling. Thank you. Something else popped in. Yes, Kim, what do you think? Why do you think that educators are the question is, do you think educators are undervalued?
Yeah, definitely educators are undervalued. I think, you know, I think our situation's a little different here in Canada. We do have teachers unions, and unless you teach in a private school, you're part of the public teacher union. So we do have collective bargaining, and we do have that level of support, which is pretty phenomenal. And particularly in BC, we have a really strong union here, and we are like our current government supports unions a lot more so than our past governments have. So we're in a better situation in that term. But undervalued, absolutely, because I think what was happening a lot during the pandemic, like I would open my email at 8:30 in the morning and I would be answering emails until noon, because like Kate said, there's this assumption that the parents think that they're the ones who are doing the schooling, and they think, well, I'm homeschooling now and you aren't giving me what I need to homeschool my child. And I think that what they're not understanding is that, well, first of all, if you feel like I'm not giving you what you need in order to homeschool your child, then you're not homeschooling. You've already answered your own issue there.
Yes.
But what we were running into a lot is parents who were feeling like, teachers weren't doing enough because we weren't there in person, and that I should be able to answer my email up until 9 or 10 o'clock at night, or, you know, throughout the day, I should be able to make phone calls. Like I had parents email me and say, well, actually you calling within the school hour doesn't work for me. I need you to call me at 7 tonight. And I'm like, well, I'm still employed through those hours and I should still be allowed to have a break. But all of a sudden it was like, I was on the clock 100% of the time, and there was no value for my free time or my space to be able to just be a human and not a teacher, and that there was no room to be both. And that was really difficult. And I think part of that, like we were saying earlier, and what Kate just brought up, is because teaching is a female dominated profession. And I think that there's this expectation as women that we are going to be caregivers, and that we aren't only managing the professional aspects, but we manage all of the aspects, because as women, like, we are our household managers more often than not. We are our children's managers more often than not. We manage the expectations that our family has, as well as the expectations that our employer has. And I don't know that there's that same level of expectation placed on men in society. Like I was saying earlier, my partner, he started work online, and he, all of a sudden, everybody is throwing these accolades at him for how he was able to adapt. And I was like, well, I'm not getting any accolades for having to adapt to this. All I'm getting is a lot of grief from families saying that I'm not doing it well enough, or I'm not doing it often enough, or that I'm not doing enough. And that's just what we kept hearing, I think, as educators, is that it was never enough. And that if we weren't physically in the building, there was no amount of time we could provide online that was sufficient to people thinking that we were doing our jobs. And then over and above that, there was this expectation that we would also help to manage parents' expectations, parents' own emotional responses to what was going on, and all of their children's emotional responses to what was going on, whether they were in our class or not. If I happened to be on the phone with one of my students' parents, I was suddenly her therapist, her daughter's therapist, and then her 4-year-old's therapist. And I'm like, well, it's 7 o'clock at night, and this is the time you've allotted me to call you because you're not available any other time during the day. And now I'm doing all of these things for you, and I'm juggling all of these balls. And I hang up the phone and still feel as though people are frustrated that I'm not doing more than that. And I know some of my colleagues who were getting emails that are just offensive and cruel and hurtful, saying that they are, not good enough, and they're not doing enough, or that they don't appreciate the type of curriculum that's supplied, whatever the case may be. It was constantly directed, first of all, toward my female colleagues, 90% of the time, not my male colleagues, and toward the teaching staff, who is predominantly female, and not towards our admin, who are predominantly male. And so you can't help but notice that there's a common denominator there that's happening. And I can't help but think that it's because it's a female dominated profession that we end up taking all of this additional burden on to manage our entire community's expectations about how things proceed with their children.
Thank you. Yes, Kate, I see you nodding. Yes, you want to add?
Yes to all of that. I think that's absolutely the truth. Thinking about going, really going the extra mile, and just things that we notice and inquire about. Right now, for example, we are getting ready. I'm going back to school in person. I start in 20 days. I actually start an SAT prep course tomorrow, in person, with 2 groups of 15 children. So, it's a lot for me to manage. I have parents who have, autoimmune disorders. So like I'm making a decision here, like, do I get to see my family over the holidays? Probably not. Simply because I have to go back to work in person. And again, our administration at our school they're phenomenal. And we just don't have a choice. Our school is too small not to. We're not a public school. We have to. We count on the tuition. So for us to keep our doors open and our jobs, we must open. So, you know, there is no option. And there wasn't a box to check on my teaching license that said, are you willing to put your life on the line? Like, because, you know, actually it was a couple years ago that there was a study that came out that teaching was more dangerous in America was more dangerous than being in Iraq or being a soldier in the front lines. I was like, excuse me? What? This is not what I signed up for. I signed up to educate children. I don't have children of my own, but I find that I am their mother, right? I am a stand-in for their mother. Of course, you can never be a child's mother, but I ask all the questions that their mother would ask. Are you hungry? You know, what have you done today? Are you sleepy? How long did you sleep? And like these are high school age children, right? But they're still children. And I can't imagine my male colleagues looking at them going, how many hours of sleep did you get last night? You seem tired, right? It's not going to happen, right? They're going to be like, oh, so-and-so was sleeping in my class. Wake up. And it's like, no, let's ask why they're sleepy, right?
Exactly.
That's what we do. Because we are caretakers, like Kim said, that is just so ingrained in who we are.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of on Facebook and on social media, you see the pictures of teachers where they're sitting on the sidewalk with a kid in the driveway and they're teaching them, during the pandemic. And all I could think when I saw that is like, oh, people are like, oh, what a dedicated teacher. Oh, that's so amazing. And all I could think of is like, why are we expecting this of our teachers? We're not expecting this of our business professionals. If somebody works at a company, at an IT company, we're not expecting them to go to their client's house and stand in their driveway to do a business deal. We're not expecting that. But we are expecting our teachers to do it. We are expecting our teachers to go this extra mile and, at sometimes putting themselves in physical harm and danger. And I really do think it's because we are expected as women to be the caretakers. And that's a lot to saddle people with, to be the caretakers of the youth of tomorrow. And especially when so many teachers, myself included, live paycheck to paycheck.
It is so very true. People are failing to realize that it is a profession. Yes, I know that sometimes it becomes a lifestyle because we are passionate about it. Because we're passionate about it, the lines become so thin that separation becomes a problem. And when we decide to make the separation, we then seen as selfish. I don't understand why you guys are not going back to work. It's like all the I don't know why. The minute we decide to take action because we're trying to make a separation between being the teacher and the person. I must say, like you guys, I find it frustrating. Yes, we're passionate, but it is a thin line and people are failing to separate that. Yes, but it is also a job, They're not seeing it as a job, They're seeing it as you're a teacher, so you are supposed to. So you're supposed to be a teacher 24 hours. Although I keep on saying on the program, once you're a teacher, always a teacher. However, having said that, we do need some time off too. So when we are deciding to take the time off, it should be respected.
Yes.
And I'm afraid it is not.
No, and especially in America, I'm a 9-month employee. I'm not a 12-month employee. I don't get paid over the summer to teach. So when people say you have summers off, no, I don't. It's not off. I don't get paid. No, that's not vacation.
So therefore I would need to find another job in order to pay my bills over the summer. You see, in England, we're fortunate in the sense that we get paid during the summer, unless you're an agency staff. If you're an agency, you get paid when you work. But if you're contracted to a school during the holiday period, you get paid. However, you are also expected to fulfill your duties, i.e. your marking, if there any marking left, your preparation, if you have not done the preparation, and you still have to do preparation anyway. So therefore, it is not a holiday as such, even though you're getting paid, you're still working because it becomes an expectation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Kim, what is it like over there? Is there a situation where you get paid for the 12 months?
Yeah, so we do get paid for all 12 months, and we're 10-month employees. But like you said, the expectation is that because we're paid for all 12 months, our contract might not start until September 8th, but if we don't start working on September 8th, we don't show up and say, sorry, students, you know, I'm actually in the middle of getting my lessons ready because now is when my contract starts. No, I'm doing that now. Like I'm getting my unit plans ready now, and I'm planning for September now, and I'm figuring out how to get everything ready for the students well before we're actually physically in the classroom. So it's frustrating when people say like, oh, well, you've got your summer off. And I'm like, well, no, because actually I also teach musical theater. So I'm like, I'm actually right now I'm planning what my musical is going to look like, how, especially right now with COVID, how that's going to happen in the spring, if I'm even going to be able to have a show. But that's how I spend my summers. I'm like sourcing materials and doing all of that extra labor over the summer because that's the only time I have to do it. Because starting when students are physically in my presence, I'm on the clock for 10 to 12 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I get there at 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning on a good day. Sometimes it's earlier. And then we're there until the last student leaves. And some of them just, they don't want to leave. That's their place. That's where they feel safe. That's where they want to be. Mm-hmm. And, you know, as much as we take on that caregiver role when we need to, like Kate was saying, we ask the questions, we do the work that needs to be done and support students in the way that they need to be supported. And we acknowledge if they're hungry, if they're tired, if they had a fight with their parents, if they're frustrated or overwhelmed, we give space for that. But that doesn't then mean that because we've given space for that aspect of our job, that we can put the other stuff on the back burner until the next day. It still needs to get done. And so we spend all of this additional time and emotional labor that we certainly aren't ever actually compensated for. And not that I would ever necessarily want to be financially compensated for it, but I think that people underestimate what it is that teachers do in a day-to-day basis. Yes. And you know, that 8 weeks that I have off in the summer is not 8 weeks off. And the number of students who have been emailing me and contacting me because they just want to feel connection over the summer. You know, like at what point do we start to count that as being part of our employment and start to document those extra hours that we're putting in every day so that the public can see what it is that we're actually doing with our days. You know, it's never just the academic piece. And there's this real misunderstanding that they think that all we do is provide the lesson, mark the lesson, and go home. And that's just, that's not the reality.
Yeah. It's interesting though, because when someone is in, let's say your partner, or any one of us, you know, husband, etc., is in a job, whether or not it is a social work, whether or not it's in a shop, whatever job, when they have the holiday, they get paid holiday, and they have the holiday, and nobody make an issue of it. It's like teachers, we have our paid holiday. Like you who are, you know, there might be a parents who might be a doctor, when they're on holidays, they get the paid holiday. Why is it so different that people cannot understand that when we're on holidays, we're on holidays? However, we're not on holidays because, as Kim have just said, when we have to make sure we prepare and we are there before the students get there. So your lesson plan is all sorted, especially now working online. Whatever lesson plan you had in the physical classroom, you need to dash that away because it doesn't work on the online platform. So in terms of you actually doing on the online platform, how did you transition your lesson plan onto the online platform? Did you use the same lesson plan? Anyone of you?
I didn't. No, not at all. I did not at all. Everything was thrown out the window, and I completely restarted everything. Some of the stuff I could post on, for my English students, I could kind of reuse those, but the lesson delivery had completely changed. I certainly wasn't going to be able to lecture and then do examples with them in person and have them see those examples in person and make sure that they understood and had mastery of steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 before they actually completed, so yeah, it all completely changed. I had to completely revamp all of the scaffolding that I had done for in-person learning to ensure that they had it for online learning. Even if the assignment stayed the same, or the outcome stayed the same, I should say, all of the work building up to that was completely different. And for theater, it was completely different, because there was absolutely no way that I could say, well, we're doing a performance now, because that just wasn't going to happen. So it was hours and hours and hours of revamping my curriculum with a week to be able to do it.
Thank you. Kate, in terms of you're going from the classroom to the online, how was it? What did it look like?
Like Kim, I had to really revamp my curriculum. All of my classes are discussion based. So that becomes a real challenge. So trying to figure out how to replicate that, some days I did a great job, and other days I was like, wow, that ain't it. Can't do that again. So, it was a little bit of trial and error, and my students were patient because, again, part of our classroom culture is you admit when something didn't go well. So I would jump on a Google Meet with them and be like, guys, listen, sorry, my bad. We're not going to do that again. Thank you for trying that with me. Let's try this instead. And they're like, cool, okay. But that's all, I apologized to them. I said, sorry, I'm struggling too. And they were great about it. So that was really a challenge to try to get the same kind of discussion-based interaction. And, there's really no good way to do it, especially when we have international students. So I had a student who got one of the last flights back to China. So he's on a completely different time zone from us, and he was taking my AP literature class. And, so I was like, okay, well, he can't jump on this Zoom. We ended up doing our Google Meets, after school. So we would do them sometimes at 8 o'clock when the kids, were home and awake and wanted to be engaged. So sometimes we did them at 8, sometimes we did them at 6, whatever time my kids were ready to go and engage to learn, that's when we did it. But my student in China absolutely couldn't do that. So, I wasn't about to make him watch an hour-long video of us talking about the color purple. Like, that's not going to be good for him. So I had to come up with alternatives for him, so that he could still be engaged, and where he would, we would kind of more or less send videos back and forth to each other so that I could see him and he could see me. Even if we weren't talking, kind of in real time, it was still some form of interaction. But really, as Kim mentioned, having to really redo the scaffolding was intense work, because it's so easy when the kids are in class to give them immediate feedback and corrections, that a lesson that would have taken me, 30 minutes or 40 minutes in class now takes 2 days, because I have to get the material, I have to respond, the child has to have time to see it, has to adjust, has to try again, and then I'm like, okay, we've got it. Well, in class, 30 minutes. It's like, nope, let's try it this way. Boom, done. It's not the case online. So it takes a lot of work. And as we're going back to school, we have a couple of different options at our school. So we have to go face-to-face, the teachers do. But our students can opt in or out with 24 hours notice. So they can opt into online learning. And we have to offer online learning because we do have an international population of students who may not get here. Plus, the COVID rates in South Carolina right now are astronomically high. So that's great. It's been an unmitigated disaster. So if and when a child contracts COVID, they will be home. So they have to have access to education as best as we can, as best as they're able, unless they are too sick to do school, or if they need to be quarantined because someone in their family has been exposed. So we have to offer these different options, which means we are streaming our classes. Every single class that we teach has to be streamed. So that changes the culture of our classroom going forward. Very much so. It becomes less less intimate, less safe, because you don't know who's on the other end of that stream.
Yeah.
And plus, you know, this summer, like Kim was saying, we're working on redoing our curriculum. Our country is, you know, very much facing a reckoning with its racial past. And my goodness, it's about time. So we are actively questioning our curriculum decisions, making sure that we are supporting all voices in a way that is authentic and matters. So I'm the head of our English department. So we've sat down at every single grade level and completely revamped the curriculum, on top of teaching in a pandemic.
Exactly.
So we're revamping the curriculum. Our curriculum is balanced, it's diverse, it includes a plethora of different voices. It is very much social justice oriented. We've collaborated with the history department. So teachers, and again, you know, our teachers here, while we get a 12-month salary, it's because I've chosen to stretch my, you know, salary out over 12 months. I'm not being paid those months. So I think that's a common misconception, that I'm only paid when we're in school. So yes, I'm getting a paycheck, but that's only because I stretched it out, because I can't do it like that. So, you know, I'm meeting with all of my teachers. I'm meeting with the history teachers. We are not being paid for this. And we are doing it because we are so passionate about our jobs. And honestly, like, I get excited to do that, right? This is what I love to do. I get excited to revamp curriculum. I'm so excited to teach our African-American lit class. It's going to be phenomenal. And the kids are excited about it. And it's amazing. But I think, you know, like Kim said, people don't understand what teachers do. And I would love to have someone just follow me around for a day, because tonight I was rehabbing our students, our international students' house. I was pulling up carpet last night and painting the walls for these students because they're getting ready to come back to their house. We need to replace the flooring. Well, who's going to do it? Oh, well, I know how to do it. So I guess me. So I'm pulling up carpet and scrubbing walls and painting and, like, you know, stuff like that, because the kids have to have somewhere to live. Right? We have to get ready. So that's just one way that we're getting ready to start school. And I can guarantee that if you asked any person who is not a teacher, hey, do you think a teacher is going to be remodeling a house for their students over the summer? The answer would be no.
Yeah.
People just don't know how many hats teachers wear.
Yeah.
And having to do that emotional heavy lifting that we have to do. And sometimes it's physical too, but really, like Kim mentioned, when those students reach out to you over the summer, I have to consciously make myself stop, focus on what that child is saying, listen to that child, and take the time to really slow down so that child feels heard. It doesn't matter that, like, my dinner is burning on the stove and my dog needs to get walked, and my air conditioner stopped working and it's 93 degrees. Oh, and by the way, I have to go to the store because we have a hurricane that's going to hit us on Tuesday, which is a true story. We really do. But that child is, then when they reach out, it becomes my first priority. So making myself stop and be present for that child is a lot of mental and emotional work that I think sometimes gets underestimated.
Yeah, you know, thank you. The thing about it is, there is nobody there for us, because the students are coming to us. We are the counselors, we are the therapists, but who are we putting that on? Who are we actually getting support from? And there's sometimes no one. That's why I encourage educators to journal, because the journal is our therapist. Because sometimes there is no one else who understands. So the journal gets it, and we feel as if we are in dialogue with the journal. You see, that's one of the things I keep on saying to educators. That's the only way we can actually get it out without we actually being damaged ourselves. So we need to use the journal. It is so very true. The interesting thing about what both of you are saying is the students are, when we do differentiation, and I mentioned that in all the sessions, when we do differentiation in the classroom, we do differentiation on a small scale. On the online platform, it's on a major scale because the students are differentiating for us. Look, they're saying to you guys, I cannot come on at office hours. I am going to come on at evening time. Because we're so passionate about our students and we really want to see them, we have no choice than to accommodate that. And both of you have said that is like having no choice. And it's like, Kate, as you've said, you know, your kid, your pot is burning, but they're not interested in all of that because they're coming online now. So whatever you're doing, you need to abandon that and accommodate the online now. So the interesting thing about the online platform, it forces us to differentiate in the maximum way. Whether or not we want to or not, the students are making conscious decisions for us. Because, for example, they might decide they don't want to put their cameras on. They might decide they don't even want to engage. They're going to engage with you later on. So that's the decision they're making. We have no control over the students. And as I keep saying, as educators, we are control obsessed. We are so obsessed with controlling, right? There are no educators that are going to say to me, no, we are all obsessed. In the classroom, we do things a certain way because we're in control of our classroom. On the online platform, we have no control. The students are the control ones right now because they're deciding that they're going to mute you if they want to, unless we decide to turn it around on Google, on Zoom. They're deciding that they don't want us to see their faces. Their homes are not good enough, or their children run in the background, their brothers and sisters, so they're switching off. They're controlling things. Yep. Our students are controlling things.
Don't tell them that, though. I don't think they quite know.
No, I don't think they quite know that yet. But their action are very much so, because they're saying to us that, oh, I can't really come on now. Mm-hmm. Okay. So when can you come on? Oh, the best time is 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock. The interesting thing is the parents and the children are controlling the situation. Mm-hmm. And it becomes an expectation that this is the way it's going to be. And the sad thing about all of that is the online platform have done that, because in the physical classroom, the lesson is set as it is. You see, the flip side of this as well, I feel that we are meeting students where they're at. We are meeting each student's individual needs on the online platform. In the physical classroom, we are unable to do that. In the physical classroom, it's one size fits all. Personally, I don't think that is a good thing. However, I think on the online platform, it pushes us so far back as well in terms of, individual needs, and it's tiring.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's tiring. Mm-hmm. One of the questions that keep on popping into my head is, how often were you able to see the students on the online platform? Were you able to see them at all? Or it was just blank? What was the situation, Kim?
Well, for me, if I had students show up to the online platform at all, typically they had their screens off. Like there were a few times, there was one time in particular, I had 2 students show up for my office hours. The other ones had emailed and said, I can't make it at that time, even though it was our regular class time. So realistically, they should have been able to make it. But anyways, I had 2 students show up and they accidentally turned off their camera, and it was their parent who'd been there, who was doing the work.
My goodness.
And so, like you said, we have no control over who's actually on the other side of that camera, and we have no control over who it is we're delivering that lesson plan to, or that information to. And if we have students who aren't actually engaged or doing the work, and maybe aren't passing, and the only way that they can pass is to attend, we just don't know how parents are actually involved, and if their idea of, our conversation earlier about homeschooling is just to get it done by any means possible. We just don't know. And it took a while for me to get, like, my theater class was pretty good. It took a while for me to get all of them to actually start attending. But after about a month after we were allowed to use Zoom, so we weren't allowed to use Zoom until May. So I'd say probably May is when I actually, middle of May is when I finally started to get most of my theater students on board. Mm-hmm. But it's not possible to get all of them because, like Kate said, I had international students in Austria and in Germany who just weren't, they couldn't make the times, because they were 9 hours ahead. So they couldn't do it. And some students who, because of COVID and school wasn't in session, they decided to start working more to help support their families. Mm-hmm. So then, because, McDonald's was still considered an essential service at that point and it was still open, they were taking extra shifts and working full time because their parents maybe were laid off or were taking a stipend or whatever the situation may be. And so online engagement for me was minimal at best. Like it was a struggle. It was a real struggle. And I was consistent with my times. I was consistent providing resources, but you can't force students at that point. You can't even negotiate with them to the point where they're willing to attend. Like, negotiation is really the name of the game with high schoolers a lot of the time. If they're skipping or they're not showing up, you can find ways to negotiate. Like, okay, fine, I'll bring in Timbits. That's the most Canadian thing I could have ever said. I'll bring in donuts. I just realized as I said it, could not have been more Canadian. I'll bring in donuts on Friday if you can attend this entire week. Like, there's like little strategies, and I'm not above bribery, to get students to show up and to put the work in, and you can't do that online. You just don't get that same opportunity to engage them that way online. And so, yeah, I'm not going to lie, it was very challenging to have students actually attend online. And like Kate said, I would wait and I'd get an email from a student at 8:00 at night that says, "Hey, I missed this today. And I'm sorry I couldn't attend. Can you talk now?" Okay. Yeah, let's do it now then. And you just find a way to do it. I'm sitting there, in my pajamas, drinking tea and watching TV. And I'm like, well, I guess now it's time for me to review that lesson that I did at 11 o'clock this morning. Let's just do it. And you don't have a choice. You have to find a way to do it, because otherwise you are knowingly letting your kids slip through the cracks, and none of us are willing to do that.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. Thank you. Yes. Kate, the same for you?
Yeah, I luckily I had not a huge issue as far as like my kids with engagement with the camera for my classes, because we didn't meet that often. I didn't ask them to be on a Google Meet more than once a week. I knew several of my kids, especially a child that came to school, and I had more meetings about this child before he got to school because they were really worried he wasn't going to be able to succeed in our school because it's so rigorous. And I was like, you guys, he'll be fine. Like, he's a good kid. We got this. So I have a really close relationship with him, but he has a rough family situation, him and his brother. So he was working full time and I knew it. But also he's going on a full ride football scholarship. So he had to pass. And he had to not just pass, he had to pass with A's and B's. So there were sometimes he'd get home at 10 and I would call and be like, "Hey, bud, like, I know you're tired, but can we do this math homework?" And I would sit with him and not only help him, make sure that he's doing it, be like, "Okay, but you didn't factor that right. Like, let's go back and review that." Like, I teach English, I don't really teach math. Luckily, I'm okay at math that I can do that with him. But I couldn't not pick up the phone for him. I will always do it as a teacher.
And I will always. Totally. And like, I'm sorry, I just have to jump in. Like, I just like, Totally. Like I had one of the exact same experiences, a student I was so well connected with. And that's what we do, right? Like you said, Kate, you might not be a math teacher, and I am certainly not a math teacher, but like, it's what you do. If that student knows you, loves you, trusts you, there's absolutely nothing in this world that is going to get me to refuse a phone call from them, that's going to get me to ignore that email from them. And so like I had a student one night who sent me a message and said, Kim, I know that like I'm pretty clear with my boundaries with students too. I don't let them access my Facebook or anything like that. They can follow my dog on Instagram. That's about as far as it gets. But for the most part, like they don't have my personal cell phone number, none of that kind of thing. And then I get this message from a student who is like, and had to work to find me on Facebook, send me a Facebook message and says, Kim, I sent you an email and I know it's 8:00 at night and you probably aren't checking it right now, but I'm having a really hard night. And I just need to know that you're okay and that we're still going to be able to go back to school at some point because I'm really scared. And like tears to your eyes kind of message. And I need to know that you're still going to be my teacher when we go back to school. And how do you just say like, I'll deal with that later, like there's no way. So I said, like, boundaries are different during COVID and they have to be, and we have to be able to appreciate that because we are human, and human has to come before anything else. And so like I said to this student, okay, this is my cell phone number. You lose it the minute we're back to school. This never happened. You don't have my phone number. And I said, but let's talk for a minute. Let's see how you're doing. And like, it was maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes, but she just needed to feel that connection to school because it was her safe place and I was her safe person at school. And like Kate said, you make allowances for that because you don't feel like you have any other choice. And I think this is what the public isn't seeing. They're seeing a Google Classroom and they think like that's all that's happening is that I post the assignment in the morning and that's where the engagement ends, and that I return the mark and that's where the engagement ends. But they're not seeing Kate sitting there working on math with a student that isn't her student in math. And they're not seeing me answering a call at 8:00 at night because a student is having a mental health crisis and they just need their safe person to talk to. And so the public is so disillusioned by what it is that we are actually doing as educators that they think that we're not doing our jobs when really we're doing the jobs of the parents as well while they're at home. And we're doing the jobs of their community support workers who, for whatever reason, are allowed to keep themselves safe during COVID and are not providing counseling services at this time. But we are the ones who are picking that up because we're not allowed to want to keep ourselves safe during all of this. That's, it's too much for us to want to do that. But of course, the community counselors are going to be doing that. And of course, parents are going to have to monitor their work schedules, but not us.
Right. And truly, always pick up the phone for my student. Like I have no choice because I can't live with myself if I don't. So if a student needs me and needs my help, whether it's math or whether, I can't tell you how many phone calls I had like Kim did where a kid is just calling me in tears. And I'm like, can you articulate why you're so upset? And the answer is usually no. And it's like, okay, well, let's explore this, right? Let's think about like, what can you do right now in this second that will some relief? So walking these kids through these emotional crises, and emotional crises don't happen during regular working hours. Like it's just a rule, I think, that they only can happen not when you're not on the clock. I swear. But we do it, right? And then I'm, and again, my administration really recognizes how hard we're working. They really, I feel very valued by my administration at school, which I know is not the case for all teachers. So I am lucky in that respect. But in the same breath, like we don't have a choice, we must open. So I really am, thinking about, well, what am I going to do at Christmas, right? My family is not in South Carolina where I live. My family is a 14-hour drive away. you know, I have two elderly parents. Like, I'm kind of looking at this like, well, for the first time in my life, I may not see my family on Christmas because I have to start school. So, you know, and for a plethora of reasons, right? Yes, I need a paycheck, all of these things, but also at the end of the day, like, you know, could I find another job? Maybe. But we need to start school because our kids need school.
And you shouldn't be expected to find another job.
Right.
That shouldn't be the expectation. And it's this all or nothing mentality right now where we're hearing you are either expected to do the work or you're expected to find another job. There's no, why can't we try to find a way to do the work where we still feel safe? We're not asking to not do the work. We're asking to be safe, and we're asking to be valued and appreciated for wanting to be safe.
Yeah. And our school, you know, they've done everything they can to help us, and to, you know, our kids are wearing masks. We're doing daily screenings. We have foggers for the classrooms. Like, we have everything that we can possibly have to be safe. But at the end of the day, we don't know enough about COVID. We don't know enough about transmission. And it is so highly contagious that, I mean, right now in South Carolina, we have more cases than when we dismissed school by a ton, like 3 times. Like, it's a ton. So to tell me that, you know, well, we're going to be safe. Well, no, you don't know that. So, you know, that's really, I'm having an internal struggle with, wow, I want to see my family, and really relying on several of the coaches that are here who have become my family here. And, you know, we're all exposed in the same. So like, I'm with them a lot because they have become my stand-in family. And I'm so grateful for them and for that. Because I don't know what I want, right? I don't know without the support system, because we so often, like we were saying, we don't have that support system. We're all on the receiving end of the trauma and the emotions, and we don't always have an outlet. So for me, that outlet comes in the form of the coaches, and a community, and an understanding that we are in this together. The world might not understand us, but we understand each other, and we're going to love each other unconditionally. And when one of us is having a bad day, we don't have to explain ourselves, right? I can just go sit on their couch, just be like put on Hamilton. I want to watch that. And there's no questions asked, right? That's okay. And it's really empowering to see teachers caring and loving other teachers. I think it's so important.
Whoa. You guys froze it. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
You guys froze for a minute. I had frozen people on the screen. Wow. You know, the other thing that actually crossed my mind, this is something I'm actually thinking about as well. When we actually go back in the school, because you guys are going back in the physical classroom before I do, education is going to be a secondary something in terms of the intellectual needs of the children way down below, because what you will be concentrating on is the emotional and the psychological need of that child, because they're now coming out of a trauma. So how are you going to deal with that? And or how equipped do you feel that you're able to be, how equipped do you feel you are to deal with it? Okay.
I mean, we're teachers. We're going to do it because that's what we do. Yeah. That's just who we are as people, and we're going to do it, and we're going to do it the best way that we can. You know, in addition to caring for our children's physical safety, of making sure that they're being socially distant or physically distant and wearing a mask and, you know, things like that. We're teachers, so we're going to do it, and we're going to use the resources we have, and we're going to pour our heart and soul into it. Which again, I think people don't quite understand what that looks like.
So the children so when you guys start, when you're starting in 10, 14 days time, so you need to, so what you're saying is when you actually start, your children are going to be wearing masks and they'll be physically distanced. And are they adding in any extra in terms of the toilet facilities? And we know toilets are a problem. So the toilet is going to be clean every 20 minutes, every half an hour?
Yeah, so for us, we have actually hired someone full-time to do like the cleaning. So our restrooms will be cleaned every class period. Our campus it looks like a small college campus. It's a collection of different buildings. So we'll have one-way buildings, one-way hallways, one-way sidewalks, as well as someone who will clean all of the door pushes, all of the handles all day. So we will continuously have someone cleaning all day. We also will have our teachers or students as they come in will wipe off their desk. So they'll be responsible for cleaning their personal space as they come in for class every day. So we have, those kind of protocols in place. Our class sizes are capped at 15. Which is phenomenal. And I know, in the United States, that's very difficult to do. But again, our administration has been wonderful and really understands the need to do that. So actually was it yesterday? Yes, yesterday. I was on campus rearranging my classroom to comply with our CDC guidelines and, making sure our students are facing the same way. I had my ruler of like this far apart for each chair and trying to figure out what that would look like for my classroom, because my classroom, we all sat in a circle. Well, okay, we can't do that.
Yeah, exactly.
So rearranging the space and taking some time to make it work. Yeah, I mean, I think our school has done the best job they can with the information that we have. But there are no guarantees, of course.
Thank you. So Kim, when are you going back?
Yeah, I go back. Teachers are back to school the last week of August, and then students come in on September 8th, I believe is our first day. But I have no idea what that's going to look like. We were told in June that we were going to do kind of a mixed hybrid version of education. So we'd have students come in twice a week. So half of our class would come in Monday, Wednesday, the other half of our classes would come in Tuesday, Thursday. And then that was stage 2 for rolling into back into regular programming. But then it just announced last week that they've changed stage 2 to be full classes, full time. I have no idea. I have literally no idea what that's going to look like. They haven't given us any information on what that's going to look like. In terms of cleaning practices, in terms of social distancing, in terms of whether or not it's mandatory for students to wear masks or not. I know that that's been obviously on the table, but right now they've said masks optional. So I honestly have no idea. And then our school in particular, just our school, is in the process of moving buildings. So we had to, in June, pack up our entire room because we're on an earthquake fault line. And so we have the oldest building in Western Canada. And so they have to actually seismically upgrade our building. So we had to pack everything up, move it over. And I can't even get into my classroom until the end of August. So even if I wanted to go in and start trying to set things up for myself to feel prepared in terms of social distancing, I can't until the last week because my room's not even finished being built. And so I have no answers for any of those questions. And I wish I did. I wish I knew more about what September was going to hold. I have no idea. And students are asking, and I have nothing to tell them. It's crazy.
You see, the thing about it, one of the things I would find is if I have no answer as an educator, I keep on saying that we are control obsessed. It means that you have no control over how to fix things. Whereas Kate, you have an added advantage. You already went in, you measure, so you have in your head a visual image as to what you are going to do and something to play around with.
Yes.
Well, whereas Kim has no idea. It's like a blank slate here. She doesn't even to show what she's, what's happening there. So that is even more challenging. You see, that's the whole thing about it. The uncertainty becomes the challenge. Mm-hmm. What would you say have been the best thing for you on using the online platform? What are the pluses for you?
For me, the best part, I think, was the opportunity to revisit my delivery model. So I was very much, being a theater teacher, you get very much accustomed to a certain way of doing theater, and it's always in person, and it's always audience driven, and it's always you know, about the art. And I got really, I guess I was doing it in kind of one way repeatedly, even though I would redo my curriculum every year, because I like to do that. I like to be able to provide students with a different curriculum every year, and we would do different things. It was different. It was doing the same things differently. And so being able to, I guess, revamp and have to think on the fly for theater, how I was going to engage students online, actually really, I created probably one of the best units I have ever done. The students loved. They absolutely went wild for it. And at first they were like, I'm not going to engage. I'm not going to do this. I'm scared of doing theater online. And then as soon as they got started, it was escapism for them. They got to build characters, and it was intricate, and it was so fun. We all looked forward to it every single week, logging into the Zoom platform and being different people. And so that was a highlight for me, to be able to do this trial and error. And now I know that this is something I could do in person, or I could do it online again. And that I would have this absolute complete engagement from students, regardless of how it was delivered. So I think it just forced me to think outside the box a little bit more. And I value the opportunity to be able to think outside the box and push my limits a little bit. Because I don't know that I would have created something that was that dynamic for the classroom, because I would have been able to fall on a lot of student driven work and a lot of like project-based learning and inquiry-based learning, which I love, and I'm still going to do that. But it's much harder to do that online. And so it forced me to create something that was a hybrid of both of those things, that allowed them to do some self-discovery while I was also able to like stretch my own creativity, and forced me to actually do that.
Yeah. The online platform had made us become creative and innovative. Yep. Thanks, Kate. For you?
I think, first of all, I think that teachers are just phenomenal with how creative and innovative they are.
Yeah.
I mean, true innovators. I think for me, a lot like what Kim said, is interrogating my methodology was great, and my approaches was great. But I think the biggest highlight for me was, I have a kid who comes from a rough background, and just was not engaged. Like, enjoyed being at school, but didn't enjoy school. Really sweet kid, until he wasn't. but for the most part, a really quality, just a good kid that, you know, through a series of unfortunate circumstances had a really hard life. And he, you know, I sent him home with my extra personal computer. I said, here, like, you need this, let's get this done. And he thrived. Because his teachers weren't fussing at him to sit up and listen and pay attention and know you can't go to the bathroom. And I mean, it was incredible. And I would call him every other day on Google Meet. We just have a one-on-one, like, how you doing? And he was like, yeah, well, hey, I did my geometry homework. Can you check it? And I was like, you did your homework already? Oh my gosh. I was like, yes, show me, you know? So it was just incredible that he, you know, that it just worked for him. And I just was so thankful, because I was so worried, you know, he was a junior, and I was so worried, like, what are we going to do? You know, if he can't get these grades up, you know, we're going to have a really hard time finding a post-high school plan for him. But he just really took charge of his own learning. And I think, you know, it's really hats off to the teachers in his lives who gave him the room to do that appropriately. And then trying, as I'm sitting here planning for next year, like, okay, how do I give my kids more autonomy so a child like that can take charge of their learning and thrive when we come back to the classroom? So kind of interrogating my own approaches like that, and trying to translate some of the new things I've learned about, you know, scaffolding and what works and what doesn't and what's important. And, why do I have to assess this skill 3 times? Like, I don't need to do that. So I think that has been a highlight for me and it's all centered around like, how can I give my kids more autonomy and how can I give them more space to be authentically them and thrive? So that's really my highlight.
Thank you. Earlier on, we spoke about homeschooling. How would you define homeschooling? I feel that we need to define this. Like, Kate, how would you define homeschooling?
For me, homeschooling is implementing a curriculum that you have designed and homework and whatever, curriculum and curricula that you have designed, lessons that you have designed around perhaps a standard set of learning objectives or outcomes. So like we do it by state. So if you live in South Carolina, here are the learning objectives, and that you have designed a curriculum and lessons that fulfill those learning objectives. And then you're going to then implement those lessons in your home. That is not what happened during the pandemic. The teachers developed and delivered the curriculum that was not developed by parents in their home for the most part. So homeschooling is when you develop the curriculum, you're delivering the lessons that you have designed to meet the learning objectives.
Thank you. Kim?
Yeah, same, but also assessing. You're then responsible for having to assess the work and determine whether or not certain outcomes have been met. I mean, teachers have a particular set of expertise in that we are well versed in the curricular standards for our area. Like Kate said, BC in Canada, we also have a provincial curricular standard that we have to meet and objectives that students have to be able to perform. And if a parent isn't able to cite off what objectives it is that their student is meeting with each and every assignment that they're completing, because they haven't created that assignment and they aren't familiar with the BC objectives and they don't understand assessment practices or what it's going towards or what the grad requirements are of each of these courses, then it's not homeschooling. It is parenting.
Right. So when parents keep on, when you hear in the media, oh, these parents have been homeschooling their children. Right.
No, they are parenting. They are parenting. When I was struggling in high school and I was off the rails a little bit and not doing math, and math is a subject that I struggled with in high school, and I was failing. My parents didn't call it homeschooling when they sat down next to me and forced me to do the work. My parents called it parenting because what they wanted was to see me find success, because that's what parents want. They didn't then call my teacher and say, hey, I implemented all of the work that you assigned, so I'm just wondering when I'm going to get credit for that. That never happened. But I don't know when it became this thing where parents think that helping their children succeed in school is homeschooling or teaching, because it's not the same thing.
Exactly. I totally agree with you, because what I'm seeing is they are supporting the children, because the teachers are sending the work home and say, here you are, right? Or they're actually saying, okay, can you find a way to teach your child? We're not saying to them that, okay, you need to develop the teaching model so that you're able to do Pythagoras theory another way, right? So the concept that everybody seems to have is parents who are homeschooling. Homeschooling is very different from what the media and what parents are thinking that they were doing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's unfortunately part of, the media is, I think, more at fault even than the parents, because they're the ones that are telling parents that you're homeschooling. And here, it's a little bit politicized, right, to open schools or not. We're heading into this election and it's going to be very contentious. And that's one of the things that's happening is, the opening schools has become politicized. So parents are being fed misinformation by sources that they're supposed to trust. So we have some real reflecting to do on that as a nation. But, parenting is very difficult. It's very hard, but it becomes more of a challenge when we're being fed misinformation, you know, and when parents and teachers should be on the same team, right? We all want your child to be successful. Yeah. So, you know, let's work together instead of you saying, you know, oh, teacher, you didn't give me this, or, oh, this is too much work. Like, you know, when your child comes home and says, I have all this work to do, like maybe your first reaction could be, okay, well, when did you get the assignment? Not, oh, your teacher is giving you too much work. So like, I think if we decide to trust each other and remember that we're all on the same team, regardless of what society is telling us, we're going to be way more successful.
That's so very true. That's so very true. That brings me to a next question in terms of how did you have the parents' engagement or the parent support? Or did you have the parent support?
I was pretty fortunate, to be honest. The parents who were engaged were relatively supportive. You know, they were committed to helping their child find success, and they understood that I was there to help as well. And so for the most part, the parents who were engaged were great. However, given the area that I work in, not all parents were able to engage and didn't necessarily have the capacity to offer support. So there were times when it just fell on the students' shoulders to try to get the work done, and they either did or didn't. And then my hands were kind of tied because it's not like I can sit down next to them and make sure that they're getting it done. So yeah, it really varied. Here in BC, like I said, we have a pretty strong teachers union as well. And right now it's looking like our union is not in support of us going back in September. So I don't know what that's going to actually look like. And from what I'm reading on all the different forums, there's really mixed reviews from parents about how much support there is in that decision. So I think because most parents during that time were also off work, I think that was a really different situation than when they're going back to work. And then if teachers aren't physically in the building, I don't know what that support's going to look like come September. I think it'll be different for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Kate, did you get your parents' support?
Yeah, my parents were great as far as the ones that, you know, I would say 80% of my parents were. So, you know, we have a handful that aren't, but we knew that already. It's not like there was a change from when we went online. We have a really engaged parent base. But part of that is because generally, you know, you have the stereotypical parents who are not engaged, but if you go to the basketball games and the football games and the soccer games, you meet the parents. So they're going to get. So that's how I'm a part of athletics, is because it's a different kind of engagement, a different facet of engagement with the kids and the families. So, you know, when I'm standing on the football sideline, it's a different kind of thing, right? I get to then meet parents that I aren't going to show up for parent teacher conferences. But guess what? When COVID hits, if I call them, they will answer because we already have a relationship. So, you know, I really didn't have an issue with that.
Okay, thank you. Can I have 3 tips from each of you? Could I be 3 tips in relationship to good practice, or just 3 tips? So, you know, we just summarize with 3 tips in terms of, you know, you have been online, working online, etc. What 3 tips you would give educators, or 3 practices, good practice you want to give educators? It's entirely up to you. It could be 3 practices or 3 tips. It's entirely up to you.
You have to go first, Kim.
Okay, sure. All right. Be as gracious as possible with yourself and with students. The more grace you allow them, the more likely they are to engage, actually. And that this isn't the time to start stepping up our levels of being strict or having rules or enforcement. This is the time when we start relaxing some of those policies and reevaluating what our policies are, and ensuring that we give students space to grieve right now too. The other thing I would say is pay attention for the signs of extreme anxiety, depression, just any kind of disengagement that is abnormal for a particular student, odds are it's because of one of those things, and students might need some extra support. And also pay attention to those things in yourself too, because right now we are grieving a significant loss and we are experiencing a collective trauma. And while we are all experiencing a collective trauma, we can't be everything to everyone all the time. And so we need to start to allow ourselves space to do that internal reflection and self-assessment. Am I able to take this on today? Or do I need to find an alternative way of supporting this young person? And while we see these things in our students, we see that they're experiencing anxiety, or we see that they're experiencing depression or grief or whatever, we often overlook that the reason that we're seeing it is because we're feeling it. And the reason that we see it so heavily is because it's like the judgment thing, right? You point a finger and three are pointing back. Odds are it's because you have it tenfold. And so make sure that as much as you're trying to nurture the social emotional needs of your students, that you're also nurturing your own too. And that finding space for, meaningful self-care and not trying to be everything to everyone is really important right now, because otherwise, like, teacher attrition rate is already really high. We don't need to increase burnout to the point where we lose some of the phenomenal folks who are already giving everything that they have to this profession. We honestly can't afford to lose those people. So yeah, those would be my tips.
Thank you. Okay, Kate?
I think my first one would be remember that you are not teaching your content, that you're teaching children. So you need to work to educate the whole child. You work for the whole child. That is a lot like what Kim said of being gracious.
Yeah.
Extending care and love to the child, because while my subject that I teach is English, I do not teach English. I teach children. So making sure that because you're sitting behind a screen and that body is not in front of your face, I think it's easy sometimes to forget that. It's why people aren't as kind to each other online as they are face to face. So remembering that your job as an educator is to teach the child, not the content. And sometimes there are going to be days that the content takes a backseat to teach. And that's okay. That's
exactly.
Fine.
Yeah.
My next one would be is to find your tribe, to find your group, find people who are going to lift you up and who are going to support you and who are going to push you to be the best version of yourself when you need it, and to remind you that you're good and you've got it, because teachers are resilient and phenomenal and creative. So find people that when you are feeling low and not those things, that they can say, hey, yes, you are. Like, you can do it, you matter, and you are important. And your kids think that too, right? You're doing a good job. Try as hard as you can, but don't try harder than you can. Don't try so hard that it's at your own detriment. And you need those people in your life to remind you of that. And sometimes it's family, sometimes it's not. They exist in the world. And then kind of going in hand with that is you cannot pour from an empty cup. So make sure that you take the time and do the things that you need to do. And it can be simple. I'm not saying like you have to go on this eat, pray, love. Please don't. It's a pandemic. But something as simple as, for me, it's like, I'm just going to hang out with my dog for a little bit. And I'm going to, read a book that I just want to read, not something I'm teaching, or I'm going to watch this webinar. Like, so I'm addicted to webinars, right? Because I love learning. It's one of my favorite things. So I became a teacher. So like, for me, that is my version of self-care. Like, I get to learn about something new in a different area. And then I get excited about teaching again. So making sure that you are taking the time to breathe is so important, because you can't help if you're not whole.
Yep. Yep, thank you very much. That is so very true. And to wrap up, one of the things we need to remember as educators, it doesn't matter what the press is saying about us. We need to remember we are great. We are doing a fantastic job. We've always done a fantastic job. You also need to remember that no other profession are being hammered like that. No other profession is under the microscope as you are. You also have to remember that you are good enough and you're passionate enough. That's the reason why you're still in the profession. Educators, I urge you to remember your greatness because they're in there. Also urge you to remember in terms of self-care and self-love. As Kate and Kim have said, that if you haven't got enough, you cannot give anything. You need to have enough to give. And in order for your student to get, you have to fill up your cup so that you could pour from that cup. First of all, you need to love yourself. You need to care for yourself. It doesn't matter, people would be saying to you that it is selfish. It is selfish not to care for yourself. Because when you don't care for yourself, it means that when you become ill, someone else will have to pick up for you. Someone else will have to look after you. And that is selfish. Whereas if you are taking care of yourself and love yourself and care for you, you wouldn't be tired. You wouldn't be frustrated. You wouldn't be burnt out. You'll be able to have enough to give enough. So the most important thing, educators, is you need to self-care, self-love. Ignore what anyone else is saying to you that you're selfish. Yes, embrace it that they're saying you're selfish. That's fine. But if you don't love you, no one else would love you. First, love thyself. Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you very much for my guests. It was fantastic. It was brilliant. Now people are seeing more and more and more the real thing of what we do, not what they think that we do. This is exactly what we do. Thank you very much to my audience. Thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. Can you please like, share, and comment? When you comment, one of us is going to respond to you later on. But please like, share, and comment, because I'm sure parents and other educators, you are getting a lot from this. And other educators, you need to remember, you are not alone. We are here. We are sharing the same experiences like you are. It could be in a different country, but we are still having the challenges in terms of the internet, in terms of coming on. It's there. Love you guys. See you guys tomorrow with another educator. Bye-bye.